Today we're going to be looking at Romans chapter 10, verses 16 through 21. It's really talking about hearing through the words of Christ. Before we get started on our message, just please join me in prayer as we just seek God's words today. So Father God, we just continue to worship you, continue to love you, continue to just want to grow closer and closer to you. Jesus, we just thank you for all that you've done and your desires to be King of our hearts, to be our friends, to be with us every step of the way. Your Lordship means that we are with you in everything. And so we just thank you for the honor that you want to walk alongside us and have us carry out your mission. And so we just pray that we're able to be transformed. Our hearts will be more like yours. And we can really let these words sink deep in our heart. And we just thank you for always being faithful and knowing that you'll never let us down. And so we just pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so the main title, right, is Faith Comes from Hearing Through the Word of Christ. And so a lot of times we talk about this like we need to hear from God. We need to hear from God. And so in many ways, the word hearing for us has kind of lost its nuance of what it meant for them, right? Because a lot of times you can hear something, but are you listening to it, right? I think about little kids. They're talking to their parents all the time like, Mom, 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 Dad, Dad, right? Parents learn to just block it out, right? If you're watching something that you love and somebody's trying to talk to you, you can hear them in the background, but you're just focusing on what you want to listen to. Right? Does that make sense? And so this is what we're talking about. Like for so many people, God speaking to them, Jesus is speaking to them, and yet they weren't actually listening. And so this is where Paul's going to try to talk about this, but really there is an importance of we really must listen to Jesus, right? We can't just hear and know that he said a bunch of things and that he's this good Lord and Savior. We must directly listen to him and follow him. Otherwise, it's going to be disastrous for us or disastrous for others. So when I think about this separation of hearing and listening, there was a story that come to mind when I used to jump out of airplanes, right? When we jump, there's about 1,000 people in the sky. So the whole sky turns green, right? It's one of the coolest things you'll ever see, just all these parachutes across, and we just black out the sun, right? And so when we do that, when you imagine that there's 1,000 people all closely together, any type of move that you make is going to affect the person next to you, right? You don't have a lot of space, so your parachutes can collide. If you go underneath somebody, you'll take all the air out from theirs and they'll fall, right? Like there's all kinds of things where we must work together. And so to do this job, you have to go through this 3 weeks of training, right? Jump school. And so in that school, it is all about learning how to follow instructions, right? They just constantly drill you over and over and over and over again. You must follow every single thing that's said. You cannot miss one detail. One detail can be somebody else's life, right? So all day long, they're just drilling it. Listen, 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 listen. And so when you get to do your first jump, we jump 100 at a time. Right? So you jump out of one plane. And so the first time, normally you jump about 800 feet. You fall really fast and hit quick. But they let you jump 1,200 feet your first time. Right? They want to give you a couple seconds to adjust and learn what it feels like to feel the wind, all the adrenaline, what's going on, right? How to keep focused when everything's going on that's crazy out there. And so when you're doing this first jump, they actually have like all these burn barrels set up in this huge landing zone, right? So they're burning wood, so smoke's coming up. So it's meant to show you the wind, right? Which direction it's going, all kinds of stuff. Because you need to be able to see the wind's direction to see what hazard you're going to run into. Does that make sense? So when you're first learning how to estimate how the wind's going, you need a visual. So they have the smoke barrels. They have guys on the ground with bullhorns yelling at you, right? They're going to try to yell instructions to you. They've done hundreds and hundreds of jumps. They know how, and they can tell and give you good guidance. And so they also put ambulances out there. So there's all these strategically placed ambulances just in case you get hurt, right? If you panic, you get nervous, you don't know what to do when you're first landing. And so they're ready to give you aid right away. Right, so they're trying to do everything to make it as easy as possible for you. So on my first jump, when we jump out, right, all 100 of us are in the sky. And so the guy on the ground with his bullhorn, he sees the direction, and he sees one guy's going to run right into the ambulance. Right? So he grabs the bullhorn and he starts yelling, hey, you, right in the middle, pull your left slip. So if you ever see a parachute, there's like 4 ropes that come out from it. Right? 2 on the left, 2 on the right. So you pull them to move. You pull the 2 on the left, 2 on the right to go this way, forward, backwards. Right? So he's trying to tell them, pull your left slip. So when he yells this out to everybody, 99 of us grab our left slips and pull to the left. Right? And so the one guy did not do it. He was just sitting in the middle, just going. And so the guy on the bullhorn's yelling like, no, no. Like all of you that just pulled your left slip, don't do it again. Right? I'm only talking to the one guy that did not pull his left slip the last time. So he's like, guy that did not pull it, pull your left slip. And the guy's just going like this, doesn't do anything. Right? So he just keeps going and going. And so the guy's trying to yell him on the bullhorn. And so all of us, we hit the ground first, and then we look up like, what's going to happen to this guy? Because you can see he's headed straight for this ambulance. Somehow, I don't know what's in his mind or why he can't see it, but he's just going like this, doo-doo-doo, right into it. So the guy in the bullhorn is trying to run at him, yelling, don't, pull it, do something. And so next thing you know, boom, right, dude crashes right into the ambulance. And so he's knocked out, right, he's hurt. So the guy with the bullhorn runs up and he's yelling at him, like, why didn't you pull your left slip? Why didn't you listen? I was telling you, everybody else was listening except you. What was wrong with you? You deserve this, right? Guy's unconscious, he can't hear. Now he finally has a good reason not to listen, right? But so now this guy obviously gets taken away in the ambulance. But when that happened, I was understanding where it's like, man, you could hear the instructions going off in the background, but he's just lost in what he was doing, right? He was panicked, he was fearful, and in reality, that fear just led to him getting hit, right? There was somebody there giving him instructions, expertise, care for him, all kinds of stuff, and he could not hear it, right? He could not actually hear it to be able to listen to it. And this is really where we're talking about what Paul's going to say. Are you really hearing from Christ? Are you really listening to him? Right? So we're going to have the verses up here, and we're going to take a quick look at it. Right? But hopefully you can see as you now read these verses, what is the true definition of hearing? Are these people really hearing and listening to Jesus? So the scripture's on the paper to make it easier for you guys. But it says, but they have not all obeyed the gospel. For Isaiah says, Lord, who has believed what he has heard from us? So faith comes from hearing, and hearing through the word of Christ. But I ask, have they not heard? Indeed they have, for their voice has gone out to all the earth, and their words to the ends of the world. But I ask, did Israel not understand? First Moses says, I will make you jealous of those who are not a nation. With a foolish nation, I will make you angry. Then Isaiah is so bold as to say, I have been found by those who did not seek me. I have shown myself to those who did not ask for me. But of Israel, he says, all day long I have held out my hands to a disobedient and contrary people. All right, so as we read this, right, Paul is definitely touching into the Old Testament. He is reminding this Israel audience and the new Christians, the Gentile Christians, of what happens when you stop listening, right? What happens when you just get Christ and then stop listening? What happens when you see God, stop listening? And so when he starts it off, he's saying, like, the Israelites did not always believe the good news. A lot of us think, like, okay, they didn't believe in Jesus, they didn't follow him, they made that mistake, they paid the price for it. But that is not the first time Israel has failed to follow the good news, right? How many times have they constantly heard from God and didn't do what they were supposed to do? This was a pattern long before Jesus. There's a pattern for thousands of years that they've constantly not listened and not believed, and they've kind of faced all these type of consequences. One of them was like Abraham being a father, right? When God's telling him, hey, you're going to have a son. He doesn't believe him, right? He's too old. He tells the wife, she laughs, right? There was this good news that they're finally going to get the child that they're waiting for, and all of a sudden they didn't believe it, right? Did not believe in the good news. Moses telling them he was sent to free them, right? As soon as Pharaoh makes them do bricks without straw, what do? Oh, man, like, look what you've done to us. Our lives are terrible. They didn't believe that God was there to help them, right? They didn't believe that now the messenger was sent and the process was beginning for them to be free, right? They just saw, oh, this is a hardship that we can't do on our own, so this must not be good news, right? Obviously, when they get to the promised land, right, they saw God do all this miraculous stuff, seen him, through splitting the Red Sea, providing food, all kinds of stuff. And yet, when it came to the promised land, when they see all these giants, they're like, we can't do it, right? God said the good news is you're going to live in this land that's flowing with milk and honey, right? You're going to be blessed. You're going to have all these things. They saw how big the fruit were. They saw how big the food was. That report was right there. They brought it back. And yet they somehow were fearful and did not believe in God's strength no more. Does that make sense? That's what we see. Like, how much could God do for them? He did it all. And yet they didn't actually listen and believe in his strength and power. Right? So then that's where obviously they did not go in there. If you see all the Old Testament prophets constantly, Hosea, Jeremiah, Samuel, all these people gave the people warnings, telling them there's good news if you follow God. Right? There's protection, there's blessings, there's all kinds of stuff. What they do? Ignored it. Right? They said, well, this is a better way. This is a better blessing. Or I think this is more secure. I'm going to stay with this. And so they ignored the good news. Right? So when they come now to ignore Jesus' good news, it is not a shocker to anybody. Does that make sense? It is not a shock that they have yet to ever follow the good news. They see God, but they don't actually hear from him, right? They don't want to hear what's going on. And so this is where Paul's now going to double down, where it's like, not only did you not listen to God when you saw him, but even those that are not even part of Israel have seen what he's done and followed him more than you have. Right? He's saying people have seen God, and all of a sudden they've come to our family. God let them join, and they had less messengers than you ever did. Right? So in this, when Paul's talking about like everyone has heard about God, there's these two terms that we talk about. It's called general revelation, special revelation. General revelation is typically like you see God through creation, see him through his handiwork, right? The way he put the earth, the universe, our bodies, every type of thing, the balance. Most people say like there must be a creator in that, right? So there's a way like general throughout everything we can see who God is. Most of us, we now have the Bible. That is what we consider general revelation as well. All these stories, God has put it together to reveal himself to you, and it's available to everyone. Right? Special revelation, it was God, when God directly talks to somebody and tells them or shows them, right, in their lives, in the midst of them. All the writers of the Bible got special revelation, right? They heard from God, they wrote down what he was saying, and that's what gave us our Bibles, right? But they got it from God. A lot of character, right? When Moses is leading Egypt, when they're seeing all these miracles, those are special revelations. God is literally showing them, I'm more powerful than the gods of Egypt. I'm more powerful than the laws of nature, all kinds of stuff. Right, so he's doing all these special things. And so but God's saying, like, there's a lot of people that have used general revelation and have come to my faith and come to have faith in me. They didn't have a messenger. So there's two people in the Old Testament that actually pop up that really establish this and really help us understand where it's like the heavens do declare God. Right, there's a Psalm 19, I put it there, where it says, like, the heavens and the skies declare the glory of God. There's two people in the Old Testament that really show this. Does anybody know who they are? Who were the first two, basically, outsiders of the Israel family that come to faith in God? Anybody? The clue is this before Rahab. What was that? Anybody? It says Job on there. I gave you one. I gave you 50%. So Job is a character, and also his name is Melchizedek. All right? Job, if you understand, when we date Job historically, his life actually happens around the time of Genesis, right? It gives details about the tribes he's in, the area he lived. We believe that he lived during the time of Genesis. And when you look at his lineage, there is no direct tie to anybody. Have you guys ever noticed that? It just talks about here's this man, Job, who loves God. He lives in this area. It doesn't tell you where he's actually related to anybody. We understand everybody comes from God, but we have no direct ties to Job. Because if you know the regions that he lived in that are listed, he's actually living in Gentile country, right? So we can pretty much assume he was a Gentile. But yet somehow he was able to see God, follow him, and God chose him as this champion to show the devil that he's wrong, right? So that's what we say. Like, Abraham is obviously the father of faith. That's one of God's champions there. But God even had a champion outside where he saw God through creation, Sodom, and God responded to him. That makes sense. We don't get enough details how Job came to all these things, but that's what we said. His story is in there for a reason. Moses wrote this to show people, like, there is somebody there's people that come around that God is, they sought God, and he's found them. Melchizedek is the same thing, right? Melchizedek shows up after Abraham rescues his nephew Lot, right? He fights these three kings, he beats them. All of a sudden, after the victory, this Melchizedek shows up and he's like, hey, offer up 10% to God. Right? Honor God in this. And so this is where this guy shows up out of nowhere. He's now teaching the father of faith to how to honor God in his victory. Right? And we have no direct understanding where Melchizedek came from. Came out of the wilderness and taught him. And so this character is also important too because Jesus has a direct tie to Melchizedek. If you read Hebrews, he tells you, I'm a high priest in the order of Melchizedek. Right? Basically he's saying, like, I'm a priest coming out of the wilderness here to deliver the word. Does that make sense? So that's where we say, like, God is honoring these two people that have sought him and found him, not being tied, without having really any messengers on earth. Right? They sought him, God directly went to them. And so that's where we see, like, Jesus had that same mentality, right? When he's saying, I'm from the order of Melchizedek, he came out of the wilderness. When he came out of Galilee, Nazareth, you see these people saying, like, what good things come out of there? No Messiah is going to come from there. Does that make sense? So that's where Jesus is kind of showing them, like, you guys have never understood that God comes out of anywhere, right? It's like you don't really realize his message is more important than about who it came from. And so this is where we can see, like, God does reveal himself to everybody, and there's a choice. Are they going to follow him? Right? Because this is what Paul is saying. Like, Israel did not follow God due to a lack of ignorance. They did not lack enough evidence from God to believe in him. They had more than enough, and yet somehow they failed. They failed to follow him because they chose not to follow him. Does that make sense? Like, other people have done it. That's why we use Rahab. Rahab is a great story where if you look at her full life and the details, when she first hides the 2 spies, she does not have an interaction with them. She just hides them and then lies to the guards that are searching for them. Right? So she's risking her life before she's ever talked to them, before she ever asked for them to save her. Right? She's risking her life on faith from the very get-go. So once she tells the guards they're not there and they move on, she then goes and talks to them. And so she asks them, like, can you guys save me? And it's important to see what she says. She's like, I have heard of the stories of what happened in Egypt and how all throughout your travels of how God has been with you. I want to be under that God. Does that make sense? That's what we're talking about. That whole general, she saw everything that was going on, and she said, I want to follow him. I'm willing to risk my life. Right? I just did it right now, right, to show you I really believe in him. Will you save me when you come to wipe everybody out? Will you? And so that's what we see. Like, you could, for on many of people, they see God doing all kinds of stuff. Question is, will they choose to follow him? Most people cannot really say that they don't see God. Right? We might feel like they could have got more, maybe. But at the same time, God is saying, even the people that I've showed more and more and more to, there is no guarantee that they want to submit and follow me. Right? So that's where Paul is now telling these people, ignorance was never the reason why you didn't follow God. It was because you wanted your own things, right? You wanted to do what you wanted to do. And so it's important to understand that there's always consequences for their unbelief. Right? Abraham was the first example. When he has the son in his own power, he has it with his handmaid. That becomes the greatest enemy to Israel. Right? They're still enemies to this day. Right? Ishmael, his descendants are basically all the Muslims. Right? They have all that direct lineage to them. So they're still fighting, right? They're still fighting to this day. That's not God punishing them. It's because imagine you have 2 siblings. One of them is a half brother. One of them is the real one. Right? One of them is a mistake. The other one is a gift from God. Can you imagine those kinds of debates? Can you imagine that kind of standing? Why those siblings are constantly fighting? Right? That's what we talk about. Like, God did not make them enemies just because he didn't believe. It was the natural recourse of, hey, you have sons like this on your own or an illegitimate kid. They're obviously going to have all kinds of issues. Right? Israel's failure after the Exodus, right? They never got to set foot in the promised land. God said, hey, I showed you more than enough, and yet you still didn't get it. I'm going to start over with your children and really develop what faith is all about. Because you guys don't have faith. You believe in me. You know I'm real because you saw me. But you don't have faith in me. And that's not what my first community needs to be. Right? So that's why he moved on. But the two spies that believed from that generation, they went in. Right? God did not punish them. Israel's failures to listen to the prophets. Right? We talked about that. If you look at why Babylon, Persia, all these different countries basically wiped them out, enslaved them, right? God tried to warn them over and over again, these nations are coming. And they ignored the prophets. And so part of what God had said was, you guys were supposed to be an example of what it's like to be under God and have all the blessings that he's given us, right? If you guys would have done what's right, those other nations would have wanted to follow me just like and have what you have. But instead, you did what they thought was important. You built up all your wealth, and now they looked at you as a threat and said, I want what you have. Hey, you collected a lot of gold. I appreciate it. Let me have that. Right? So their greed, all the stuff that they built up, and not showing that it was from God, it made them enemies to all those other empires, and they got wiped out because of it. Does that make sense? It wasn't God saying, I'm going to punish you for this. God was telling them, you should have followed me and used me as your protection, because that's what's really going to set you apart. Right? So that's where God's like, you wanted to do what you want, then go ahead and fight them on your own. And obviously they lost. And the Jews, right, obviously they crucified Jesus. That led to the Gentiles joining God's family. And so this is it's kind of a funny punishment for Israel. They didn't believe in Jesus. So his punishment was like, I'm going to bring more people into the family. Is that really a punishment? Who's an older sibling in here? Right? If you ever have a younger sibling come, is their life easier? Do they take a lot of the stuff that you could have had? Have you guys ever heard that? No? Like you were the parent's favorite, and then all of a sudden the baby child is the best one. Right? Like, oh, let's give him this, let's give him that. right? When you're the older sibling, you had like a higher curfew, you didn't get as much technology, all kinds of stuff. And they're like, you got to wait to this age and this age. And then all of a sudden, your younger sibling comes in. They're like, we'll let them have it. You have it, now they can have it. Have you ever seen that? Right? So when you're the older sibling and you paid your dues, and yet all of a sudden the younger sibling's getting it all, it's like, what the heck? Like, it makes you mad, right? So this is where God is kind of showing Israel, like, you've been spending all this time following me, and now you're suffering because of it, and yet I'm going to welcome them like nothing. I'm going to make the rules easier for them. Right? I'm going to give them Jesus. He's going to cover them all in every single thing. They don't have to do all the sacrificial system before. They don't have to follow all the same laws, right? They didn't have to be circumcised. They didn't have to give up all the foods. They didn't have to do as much. Does that make sense? Like, God was trying to be as forgiving and open, and Israel did not have that. And so this is where we say, like, God, obviously, instead of Israel celebrating, hey, we're still in God's family, other people are coming, they got mad, and like I said, they still now have a hardened heart against God just because you let more people in. And so as Paul is really establishing and really trying to show them like this history of ours and how much it is shown that we do not really listen to God and listen to Christ, it was like we really need to understand what God has done and what he's going to do for us for the present and the future. And so there's a principle that stands out. And it's at the very end. It said, God holds his hands to all of us, even though we repeat the same patterns, right? We must seek Jesus to break those patterns because we cannot do it on our own. This understanding where it was like, it was all on Jesus. It was always going to rest on him. He was going to be the reason that they were saved. They failed to understand that. They failed to give up their control, their security, any type of things where it's like, I can control my destiny. It was more like, we must really surrender to God. That's what they were supposed to do all along, right? I need to give up what I want, what I believe is the best, what I believe is what needs to happen. And they're like, I'm going to trust God 100% and everything will work out, right? That's what they needed to do, and they needed to understand that Jesus was now the one that's going to help them to get to that 100%. And so obviously Israel failed that pattern, and it's still a reminder to us that we can fail that pattern as well. We know Jesus, we believe in him, but do we have the faith in him, right? Do we really believe he'll do all the things? Do we really do all our actions based upon what his words were? Right? Are we really hearing him and understand and following it? And so as I share this and this warning where Paul's trying to tell them, look at the pattern and understand it's coming for you, right? How are you going to avoid it? I had this same problem as Israel, right? I had this same pattern where it was like, I fell back into my old ways, or I fell back into my own strength, right? Thinking whatever I needed to do, or whatever outcome I thought was best, what I would go for. I shared on Friday with the youth that I was working to help one of my enemies, right? I took one of my biggest enemies and made him one of my best friends in a matter of 3 months. I followed all God's teachings. I followed everything that Jesus said. And I was really able to witness to him and change his life. Right? So in this great moment, in this great setting, I saw all the power of God. And I was like, man, I'm really convinced that God can do it. Right? At this point, I was already going to be a pastor. I was already doing my undergrad. All I needed was to wait the one last year of my contract in the Army. And I was free to do what I wanted to do. So after I worked on this one enemy, when I came back to my main base, we had an even greater enemy, this female leader that we had, right? She was as evil as it gets. She broke like every moral, ethical code we had and stood for. And so I was like, God said, forgive everybody. So I was like, now I'm coming from this great experience. I'm going to try it again. I got to do it again, right? I need to work on forgiveness before I become a pastor. And so as I'm trying to work to forgive this lady and help her, all the 10 people that we work with said no. They're like, she does not deserve it, right? They're like, we can understand why you helped that one guy, why you were able to help him and him become who he was. Like, that's good. But she is too far. Like, she's too far gone. She's done too much to hurt us. Like, she does not deserve anything good in her life, right? And so I'm like, well, I'm caught in the middle. And so as I'm trying to do this, right, none of them want me to help her. Then all of a sudden they got mad that I wanted to help her. So one of my best friends was like, I'm going to take you out of your position. I'm going to knock you down a peg. And I'm like, what? And he's like, your heart is now on becoming a pastor. You don't care about us anymore, so you don't deserve to lead us no more. I'm going to take you down, right? So as he did that, my friends were all split, right? Everybody tried to warn him not to do it. He wasn't going to win. And so as everybody's kind of now falling apart, angry, right? They just do not want this person to be forgiven based on what she did to them. I kind of compromised, right? I was like, okay, I know what I'm supposed to do 100% to love this person the right way. But at the same time, that's going to cause these people to fall apart. And I can't see that, right? I can't have that. And so I try to meet in the middle. Let me help them. Let me still kind of find the ways. Let me work with my friend that wants to take my job. Right? Let me make sure he understands. I was like, you can take my job any way if you want it. I'm already leaving. So I was like, let me help you do it the right way, not the wrong way. Right? And so I try to do all these things, try to find ways to help them understand why they should forgive her. Because I warned them. I was like, if you don't forgive her now, in the future, she's never going to get any better, so she's going to hurt us even more down the road. Right? So I was like, your guys' desire right now is not going to help you in the long term. She's got the power of position, and she's going to do what she wants, right? It's like, we should change her now. They didn't agree, so I kind of went in the middle and helped both groups, right? I did not go 100% of what I knew God to do. And 8 months later, exactly what I predicted happened, right? She destroyed every single one of them, right? They tried to challenge her. They tried to do all these things. Didn't matter if they were better. It didn't matter if they were right. She had the position. She was able to dictate what happened, right? So all of them suffered because of it. And so for myself, now I was in this moment, right, where I was like, I tried to meet 100% to save them from themselves. I gave up. I didn't go 100% for God, and yet the results are exactly what I said, right? It would have been better if I just went 100% from the get-go. Let them do what they did. Let them fall down, and then God could pick them up. At least I did 100%, right? But in that pain, in that suffering, knowing what happened to these guys, right, and even for myself, I was like, I'm already studying to be a pastor. I was already serving at churches. Right? I knew God better than I ever had, and I was closer to him than I ever had, and yet I still failed to give him 100%. Right? So in my mind, I was like, how am I worthy to even continue serving him? How am I able to be a minister, pastor, if I can't even give him 100% when the chips were on the table? Right? When the stakes were high, I caved. I tried to do it my way. I tried to work, and I was like, that just showed me where my faith was. Right? And so I'm sitting there talking to Jesus, like, man, I was like, I failed you. I'm sorry, right? I was like, I really do not deserve the calling that you've put on my life. And so I was like, I'm sorry, Jesus, right? I could not do it. And so as I said that, right, Jesus kind of grabbing me, and he's like, the words you just said are the reason why you didn't make it. He was like, you could not do it. And he's like, what do you hear when I tell you it's on me? What do you tell you? What does it say when just make me your Lord and Savior, leave it all to me? What do those words mean to you? Right? And I'm sitting there, I was like, it's not on me. It's you. And he's like, so then why is everything based on your life about what you can do? Your other friend was easier because it was right in your wheelhouse, right? Everything lined up. I was able to leave. My friends were not a distraction. I could focus on one-on-one, right? So he was like, all these other things that came up, he was like, it was you. All your weaknesses, all the things that you have not surrendered to me, they all came up in this situation. It all came up with dealing with this person, and that's why you were not able to do it. Right? It was like, it's all because of you. You want it. You want to do it. You want to use your strength. And he's like, you have failed to hear what my message has been all about. Right? He's like, nobody can do it on their own. But that's where he says, all that come to me that are weary, right? I'm their rest. My yoke is easy. My burden is light. Right? Whatever is impossible with you is possible with me. So he's like, you thought, when you heard that story, or when you were going through that experience with that woman and the 10 people didn't want to help, and it was an impossible situation, your first instinct was not to look to me and say, Jesus, what do I do? You just try to figure it out on your own, right? You faced an impossible situation. You went on your own to do it. And he's like, you have not understood my words and listened to them and let them lead your life. And so that's where he's like, are you ready now? Do you understand that even this whole experience, it's not that you're unworthy because of it. It's just showing you where you're at and how much you need me more. Right? So he's like, this was all a learning lesson, and I still have you. I still want you. Right? That ending where it's like his hand's all out all day long. I look at it as God initially had his hand all day long. Right? It talks about like when your hand's out, you're trying to like, it's a welcome, it's a friendship, right? Like, come on, grab me. When it says he's holding it all day long, it's showing like God is steadfast. He is not letting go. And so when we see this quote from Isaiah, God has been holding out his hand the whole time through the Old Testament. They didn't grab it. So when all these people were away from God, he basically says, Jesus, grab my hand and reach out for them. Now we can reach even further. And that's exactly what Jesus is doing, right? He's reaching out to us saying, grab us, hold on to us. And so in that moment, that's what Jesus was saying. You were doing it on your own. I've been reaching out. Grab me. And now you're ready to grab. Right? So as I grabbed Jesus in that moment, after that letdown, that's where I understood. I was like, I can't stay in the army no more. Right? God was my greatest love, but at the same time, that was the greatest love I've ever had. Right? I devoted just 10 years of service, but I spent my whole childhood from 5 years up training for everything I would go through, right? 13 years plus 10, 23 years of my life was dedicated to every single thing, every choice, trying to prepare for that. And so it's like, that's how much I loved it. I was willing to do everything for it. And it was like, it became such a great love. It was a tie with Jesus, right? The army and Jesus was up here, and it's like, Jesus cannot tie with nobody. He should be number one. Everything else comes off of that. And so the consequence was I must leave. I knew I could not do both. I knew I could not choose. And so I was like, I choose my greatest love, and that's Jesus. And so that's why I said there was a consequence for that, those unbelief that happened in the past. It wasn't God punishing me saying you can't be in the army no more. I just knew there's nothing I wanted more in life after this experience than Jesus, 100%. Right? I'm hearing his words. I'm finally listening 100%. And I know I need to do something that could be 100% with him. Right? Because that's what God's kind of saying, like, come out of the army, come with me. I'm going to basically give you a Jesus boot camp, right? You're going to be with him all the time. You're just going to dedicate your life to him. And you're going to see what it really means to follow him, right? You're really going to see what his words are about. And so thankfully, like I said, Jesus brought me close. He gave me that, he gave me just the ability to come back, right? So as I've been built back up, obviously there's still pain, there's still hurt, right? I did miss that lifestyle. I did miss being with my people. But that's where this understanding of the promise of Jesus, where he says, like, my burden is light, right? He's the reason why I don't even think about it anymore. Where he placed me, how he's led my life, and how I've pursued him. I think about even now, where like working with the youth and the leaders, it's like there's some wonderful youth, right? They have so much passion for God. They have a desire to help people, compassion for all kinds of people. Even the youth leaders, right? Tremendous. All the sacrifices they make, all the choices where they're like, I want to do what God's made me to do, or I got to give up this so I can keep doing what God said, right? And it's like it's an inspiration for me. And so as I look at it, right, it's almost like they minister to me more than I minister to them, right? The love they have for God, where I've been placed. And that's where I see Jesus, where his words are like, whatever happened in the past, the grace to start over and start fresh and forget it. Where I'm at is proof, where he's like, he does not hold back those failures from me and say, you can't do these things for me anymore because you had this failure, right? He's saying that failure just showed you the most important lesson, and now we can go fresh, 100%, right? So that's what we're talking about when we see what Israel always failed to understand, where it was like, whatever happened or all these things in the past, you just need to learn from it and depend on God more. And so it's like, if we learn that lesson and we trust God 100%, everything will fall in place. Everything will be right. Everything will be peaceful, joy. That promise that he says where his burden is light, my yoke is easy, means like, it's basically saying walking with me is easy, right? And so it's like, how many of us can say our walk with Jesus right now is easy? And if it's not, then that's where you have to examine these words, right? You have to examine, are you really listening to all the things he said? Are you listening to what he said is important? Are you listening to him, what he said will bring you peace, what will bring you joy, what will give you hope, right? All those words, if you really are 100%, then you'll start to see what those mean for you. And you'll understand how easy it is to follow. Because right now, this is the easiest my life has ever been, right? This job is easiest because it's such a joy. And because of that, I can actually go after Jesus more than I ever have before. And that's what we said, like, Jesus is the one controlling it. He's the one, because even I've shared before, like, the last church I wanted to work with was a church that was always on Zoom. I hate technology. I'm more of a person. I'm more in person, right? Like, you can see I'm always acting out things and very aggressive, right? Like, I want to talk to people. No, but that's where it was like, it's like the worst thing in my life was ever to put me behind a computer screen and let me have to be it. And where did God put me? On a church that was on Zoom for a whole year, right? And so that's where I was like, at first I thought this is going to be the hardest thing in my life. But in reality, God was like, Jesus was like, let me show you who these leaders behind you. There's like all these strong leaders that we had. I think the first year we had like 7 leaders. All of them had the gifting. All of them had the ability to show me all these things. And it's like, my job became so easy. And that's where Jesus was like, you didn't see that in your own mindset that this would be the best place. But you had the most important thing. You trusted me 100%. You went to where I said to go, and you are now reaping the benefits. Right? So that's why I said, hopefully you guys can really take these words to heart and understand it's really based on Jesus. So I put some applications for you, right? You can obviously talk to us, talk with the leaders here and say, hey, what does it really mean to go after Jesus 100%? What does it mean to go after him with our whole heart? But obviously there's some practical applications too that we can do in general. Do an in-depth analysis of all Jesus said. Reread all the Gospels. Reread all his words. It's for people that grew up in church, they kind of use the same scriptures, same stories over and over and over again. You might know one of these, like a couple miracles, and you might know them well, but you only know them, but they only cover them every 7 to 10 years, right? So it's like you have not actually studied 100% of what he said, all that he's done. And it's like, how can you really be 100% after Jesus if you don't know all he said? I could give you a quiz right now and say, hey, let's see if you can identify what Jesus or did not say. And it's like, if you don't get 100%, you got to study, right? That was like most people, I think, will probably get 60, 70% of really knowing what Jesus said. And it's like, that's not good enough, right? Because part of this is like, you have to then check, see how your beliefs line up with his words to ensure you're following him and no one else. There's so many Christians that are stuck in what, like, this is what we need to do, this is what God says, this is what we must do. And it's like, did Jesus really say that? Is that really from God? Because in reality, there's a lot there. You see all these memes, you see these jokes where it's like, if Jesus came back to the church today, people would reject him. They would reject his teachings. And that is true. People have held on to things that's like, Jesus did not say that, and he said actually the opposite. And so it's like, we would also reject Jesus the same way the Jews did back then. Does that make sense? Because why? We failed to listen and understand we must be 100%. We must listen to everything. And so this is where we have to say, like, if I'm following Jesus, everything I believe, I must check against what he said. If there's a problem with what I believe and what he said, the problem's here. My interpretation, my desires, all these type of things. Right? So it's like, this is where Paul's trying to remind them. Your desires, your choices for the future was what made you ignore Jesus. Don't do it again. Don't be the group that does it as well. And that's still true to us today. So it's like, if we really want to follow Jesus, we must look at what he said and line up behind him, not have him follow what we say. And so examine how much faith you have in your actions and choices. If it is not 100%, seek Jesus like you never have before and let him take care of the rest. Right? This is where that important reminder. It's so easy to get caught up in, I need to do this. I need to find him. I need to go after him. And we're going to make the same mistake that everybody else did. As soon as they put it on their own strength, on their own determination, they fell short. Right? Because it's easy to be passionate about Jesus when you're in a bad spot. But when things are going good, you're going to forget about him. Right? And that's where we say, like, if you seek Jesus and say, Jesus, you must be the reason. You're the one carrying me. You're the one lifting me when I don't even think I need lifting. Right? All these type of things. When you put it on him, that's what it's all about. Right? The whole teaching of Israel throughout history, it was not that God wanted these people that did every single thing that he asked. What he wanted was people that he could be in relationship with. Right? People that they were connected, that they were one with. Right? So that's where you see marriage, all these type of things that God does. It's all training to understand what it means to be one. Because he's trying to say, I want to be one with you. And so if your process of knowing him is based on him drawing you close to make you one, then it's going to work. But if it's you trying to do all it on your own, that's not a real relationship. That's not a real connect. That's not one. You're not becoming one if one person's doing all the work. Does that make sense? And so this is where I said, hopefully you learn from this lesson. Understand that it's on Jesus. And when it's on, you should celebrate that. Because if it's on him, we saw his promises, right? I love that song that you picked, kept King of My Heart. Right? We're talking about it. It's like the songs and words always line together. Where it's like, you're never going to let me down. You're always, all these those words. It's like, that's what Jesus has promised. And so it's like, if you want to ensure that you're 100% with him, why would you put it on you instead of him? You can't guarantee you're going to do 100%, but he can. And he has. All right? So hopefully these words dig down deep in your heart where it's like, I need to be 100%. My life should be about going 100% after Jesus. After that, everything will fall in place. If I have all the things I want in my life, but I don't have the 100% with Jesus, then everything that you have is slowly going to erode away. Right? Everything's going to be built on a foundation that will fall. In hard times, it'll fall for a lot of different reasons. It'll fall just because you're bored. It'll fall just because you want more. All of a sudden, you're not content. Like there's all types of warnings in there where Jesus is saying, there's these treasures in heaven. There's all these type of eternal things. He's going to be the one that's going to change your perspective so that everything you have, you hold on to. All right, so that's why I said, if you really hear his words, you'll understand how comprehensive his teachings are and how wonderful they are for you, right, and for anybody else. Because even as you start to receive this, as you go after him 100%, you're going to start feeling things like, I need to share this, right? That's his words as well. Why hold it? I didn't do it just to hold you. I want everybody. Everybody should be one. Our hands are hold out for everybody. And so the image of what Jesus is saying is like, Father's holding out for us. Jesus grabs his hand. He grabs ours. All these other people, we're reaching out for others as well. That makes sense? So eventually it's this big picture of every one of us holding on to Jesus and the Father. All right, so hopefully you guys this hits your heart and you really see Jesus tonight, even after the message, and really say, how can I be 100% after you? Because I know you're 100% for me.